Welcome to Shit You Should Wipe podcast with me, Dr. Debbie, your clarity wizard, life coach, and ex-scientist. This is the place for kind humans who want their life to feel as good on the inside as they look on the outside. To achieve their life transition goal and live by design, not by default. Who want to experience personal growth, not personal change. And who want to experience more clarity, joy, and bravery. If you want to know what that means in practice, keep listening. Hey friends, welcome back to my little bubble. You know how some days have themes? Well, today's theme for me seems to be procrastination. Because today, one of my clients I coach on procrastination. I've already made a couple of posts on Instagram about procrastination, and I thought, you know what, today's a good day to make an episode about procrastination. So this one is for you if you think you're a procrastinator. If you think you're lazy or maybe incompetent, or maybe you think you just don't have enough time to do the things you want to do. Because I believe these things are not the real reasons why we procrastinate. In fact, I don't believe in using the word procrastinator. I mean, I get that it means that it is someone who repeatedly procrastinates. But to me, it's kind of the same distinction as saying someone is bad or someone did something bad. Someone might look like they're procrastinating, but they're not procrastinators. And I believe there are mostly two reasons why people look like they're procrastinating. And I also believe that procrastination has its intelligence, its reason for being. That when our unconscious makes us do or not do something, it's for a reason that sometimes our logical, conscious brain does not understand. So here are the two main reasons for procrastination that I can think of. The first one is because you have ADHD. And the second one is because you're having a nervous system response, and typically, and more specifically, a freeze response. So let's get into the first one. People with ADHD and most people with neurodiverse brain have a different relationship with time than neurotypical brains. They also have a different way of working that might be more cyclical and might look like they do something and then they don't do something for a long time, but they're actually processing information in the background of their mind. And that's when they look like they're procrastinating. And then suddenly they frantically do again. So it's like a push, break, push. And they need those cycles. So it looks like they do procrastinate, then do to make up for it. But what if that was their natural cycle? I mean, do you think that plants procrastinate in winter because they're not making flowers? Do you see what I mean? So sometimes people who procrastinate are undiagnosed or maybe even diagnosed ADHD who haven't yet learned or accepted their natural flow. Well, I mean, that's what I've been observing. Now, the second thing that looks like procrastination is nervous system response, and more specifically freeze. Freeze is an automatic response from our nervous systems that we've inherited from caveman time when we lived in the bush, and one of the strategies for avoiding being eaten by a wild animal was to freeze or even to fake death. Maybe you've seen that on documentary, like a gazelle pretending to be dead so that the lion lose interest. So freeze is a stress response to a perceived threat. And in our modern world, that threat is the fear of feeling certain feelings, or the fear of rejection, or the fear of anger or grief. So activities that are at risk of generating these feelings are perceived as threats, and we freeze. An example of that is, let's say you've inherited money, or maybe a house or a business, and you're avoiding the paperwork related to that. Well, the reason might be because there's grief there, or maybe even anger, or maybe you think you're not good with money or with business, and that you're at risk of making a mistake. So that's one reason for freezing. Another reason for freezing, which I think is even more common, is perfectionism, or what I would call not enoughism. I'm myself a recovering perfectionist, and so I've become pretty good at spotting my fellow perfectionists. So if you're one, welcome. And if you don't think you're one, stick around, because you might have a thought error lurking in your brain and telling you you're not a perfectionist. In fact, I've had clients who didn't think they were perfectionists, but after I've presented them with the quote-unquote symptoms of perfectionism, they've reconsidered. And P.S., those people were mostly men. And they had thoughts like, well, I'm not very detail-oriented, so I can't be a perfectionist. Or, I don't like perfect people. Or, I've never delivered something perfect, so I can't be a perfectionist. And these are what I call thought errors. So let's not beat around the bush and explore a list of perfectionism, quote-unquote, symptoms. I'm using this term very loosely here, that I've compiled from a book that's called Burnout, A Guide to Identifying Burnout and Pathways to Recovery. So here it is. Perfectionists tend to work hard, commit fully, push themselves to the best, are preoccupied with making the right choice, perceive expectations more acutely. They're usually workaholic, thinkaholic. They're overly detailed in conversations. They fear that others will see their flaws, some kind of imposter syndrome. They have a fear of making mistakes. They procrastinate. They strive for total control of their feelings. They have an all or nothing thinking. They're prone to catastrophizing, and they can adopt a controlling behavior. So there you go. Does any of that sound familiar? Are you surprised, maybe? One thing that becomes apparent when you consider this list is a thread of thoughts that perfectionists have. So I'll make 3 categories for that. The first one is that the perfectionist has an external sense of worth. He thinks that his behavior or actions reflect his or her worth, their worth. They're looking for validation externally and often in their work. The second one is that they tend to think binary. There's a right way and there's a wrong way to do something. And I do it all or not at all. And the third common thread is they think if only I try hard enough, then I can control things, people, outcome. Or if only I can figure it out, whatever the it is. Those are common thoughts that they have. So they struggle to walk away from situations. So I hope you can see now how procrastination can be a symptom of perfectionism. Because simply put, procrastination is fear. Fear of failing, fear of making a mistake, fear of disappointing, fear of losing or not having control, or fear of feeling feelings. Now, what happens when procrastination is not fear? So what happens is that, in my experience, it reflects a lack of capacity. And I will make a whole other episode on capacity later. But simply put, I mean, the person does not have the brain space or the energy to do things. Now, don't straight away go to, this is what it is. I don't have the energy. Because often our brain will lie to us and tell us that we're lacking energy when it's actually fear. And now I bet your brain's already taken you further down the path and has already asked, okay, well, if it's fear and or low capacity and or ADHD that makes me procrastinate, what can I do to stop procrastinating? Well, first, I would like us to pause and really integrate the understanding of why we procrastinate. So let's take a few seconds to integrate what we've talked about, because the best way to stop procrastinating is first to recognize it. Not only when you're listening to this podcast, but also when it happens. But let's start now. Pick a thing that you keep procrastinating on. I'll give you a few seconds, or maybe just jumped in your brain straight away. Okay, got it. Now, why do you think you procrastinate? What is your first thought when I say, why do you procrastinate? Or what is the sensation in your body? Did it feel like fear? Did it feel like anger, frustration? And I'm saying the first thought or the first reaction because your brain will always try to rationalize whatever you're feeling or thinking. So I hope you got to perceive that feeling you got in your body. For me, procrastination often feels like a subtle mix of urgency and overwhelm when I approach the task, followed by the relief of not having, or the relief of having another task to do. So I can avoid what I want to do. Sounds familiar? Good. So now you hopefully know how procrastination feels in your body when it shows up. And you can develop a dual approach, a dual strategy to overcome procrastination. One that addresses both your energy and fears. And side note here, I'm a big fan of having dual approaches because it's a good way to stop non-binary thinking. And I also like dual approaches that have both a practical strategy to implement and are working on ourselves, our emotion and thoughts. That it's not all one or the other. Another side note, in case you're wondering, I haven't yet met an ADHD person who's not a perfectionist. Maybe I should have mentioned that before. But let's go back to the practical approach. So the practical approach for me is to One, work on setting up a time management system that gives me a sense of control, which is what most perfectionists seek. And secondly, that works on my fears. And they're very much linked. As I told you, I'm a recovering perfectionist. And so I used to spend countless hours perfecting my schedule, studying other people's schedule, if you can believe it, and trying out different schedules to find the right one. But the truth is that there isn't one. What I've developed instead are systems to have a schedule and a to-do list that reflect my values and priorities. Maybe I should say that again. I've developed instead systems that have a schedule and to-do lists that reflect my values and priorities. So for instance, my schedule, and I use plain old Google Calendar, is heavily color-coded with many blocks, so as to give me a good idea of whether or not on any one day or week it reflects my intentions or value. For instance, I have one color for self-care, and I try to schedule self-care first. Then I have another color for anything that is family time. And then I have other colors for other things. And even if you're not self-employed, I encourage you to do that, because your brain will trick you into thinking that your work is inflexible because really it's afraid, or because you're afraid of asking to move a meeting, or of asking or considering if there's another way. I had a client who thought she had to be at work 5 days a week because she is a scientist, and scientists need to be close to their labs. Turns out there was plenty of room for her to work from home 1 or 2 days a week, which means she now saves up to 2 hours of commuting. So I like time blocking. And by that I mean making blocks, not making myself unavailable. Because it doesn't focus my schedule on tasks, but rather on priorities and values. It's kind of the same way I don't focus on outcome goals, but rather on process or happy goals. And if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen. I don't remember the exact title, but it's an episode on goal setting. And I often use that for my clients who identify as procrastinators. So one thing that I offer to them, because I never tell them what to do, like we just brainstorm ways to do things differently. It's rather than, let's say there's a big task list of admin tasks. Let's say you've been procrastinating on your inheritance, or paperwork related to that. Rather than scheduling to do, let's say, 4 tasks a day, try setting the goal of working a certain amount of time on that admin task list every day or every week. The reason for that is because in the first case, you're setting yourself up for failure if you don't manage to do the 4 tasks in the day or in the week. And then you'll tend to procrastinate next time to avoid failure. But if your goal is to work for 2 hours on the task list, no matter the outcome, then you can easily win. Right? Now, there's a very important thing for ADHD people to consider. I've coached many people who wanted to stick to a neurotypical schedule when that is not how they work. While a neurotypical perfectionist might like to have a very detailed and structured schedule, like hours by hours, some ADHD perfectionists might like to have blocks of time for certain activities and have unstructured time, or rather then a to-do list, a list of things they can pick from. Now, I'm not ADHD, but I am neurodiverse. And I also like to curate my to-do list before I integrate it into my schedule. And the more I do it, the smaller my to-do list gets. If you want to know how I do it, you can find out by downloading the Mental Offload, which is my free ebook. You'll find the link to that on my social media profiles, Facebook and Instagram. Now, it's probably time to sum up this episode. So, the things that I want you to wipe this week are the ideas that 1, you're lazy, and 2, that a perfectionist is someone who does things perfectly, because no, that doesn't exist. And it would imply that there's one right way to do things. Okay. The second thing that I wish you would remember is that procrastination can be a sign of unrecognized ADHD or fear or low capacity or perfectionism or all of the above. Okay? And the third thing is the best way to nip procrastination in the bud is to 1, learn to spot it in your body, acknowledge it, and ask, what is the fear? 2, remind yourself there's nothing wrong with you. 3, you can decide to show your brain and nervous system that you're not in danger. And 4, try to set yourself up for success. Are your goals set up for failure or success? Is your schedule set up for failure or success? Is it working for you or against you? Now, this episode is getting pretty long. I hope I haven't gone off topic too much and that you can see the link between what looks like procrastination, ADHD, fear, capacity, and perfectionism. I've tried to give you as many insight and tools as I could in this episode without making it too long. If you'd like personalized help on this topic, do not hesitate to reach out, either by direct message or using the links on my social media profiles or website. I do not bite. I do not try to get you to work with me or sell you on things you don't want to. What my clients say is that I make things feel easier and softer when they're hard, and that I help them feel more normal, quote unquote. And the trick is, I believe diversity is normal. So reach out. Bye. And if you want fresh wipes and actionable tips every single week in your inbox, you better get on my email list. It's called the Brain Wipes. Also, make sure to download the Mental Offload. It's my free ebook to learn how to start wiping things off your to-do list. It's been known to help people save precious time and energy. It's also been called what everybody's psychic butthole needs.